Welcome to the webinar, everyone. We are going to wait just a few minutes for people to sign in and join us. Hello, everyone. I'm Holly Bohart, Senior Editor of Books at NAEYC. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited that more than 1,600 educators have signed up for this webinar about cultivating positive, supportive partnerships between educators and families from one of NAEYC's newest books, Families and Educators Together, Building Great Relationships That Support Young Children. The book's authors, Derry Koralek, Nemeth and Kelly Ramsey, are with us today to encourage your daily work as practitioners, as well as to share resources and answer your questions. So I'll go ahead and give a short introduction to our presenters. Derry is president of DGK & Company, providing early educational consulting to a variety of clients, including teachers and family child care providers. Previously, she served as editor-in-chief of Young Children and Teaching Young Children, and also as Chief Publishing Officer at NAEYC. Karen is an author, speaker, and consultant on early childhood language development at Language Castle, LLC. She is the author of Basics of Supporting Dual Language Learners, an introduction for educators of children from birth through age 8. And Kelly is a family advocate, leader, and consultant at Developing People. She is a mentor coach for early childhood programs working towards creating innovative programs for families and children. Before we get started, I'm just going to talk about a few housekeeping details. The authors will be asking you questions for 2 polls during the webinar. To submit your answers, please look for the question box on the lower left side to answer. If you have any questions that you would like to ask the authors, please write them at any time in the question box. After the presentation, the authors will answer as many questions as we have time for. As a reminder, we do not offer continuing education credits or certificates of completion for our webinars. And finally, this webinar will be recorded and you'll be notified by email when it's available to view. With that, let's get started. Karen, over to you.
Well, hello, and thank you for that introduction, Holly. We are so happy to have this opportunity to share some of the work we did in researching for this book and the stories that we heard from the field. And we have a lot of experience in doing all that research and talking to programs and people across the country. We always found that our work was connected back to those 6 principles of family engagement that were developed by NAEYC. And so you'll see that we'll use them as a framework to provide you with some new ideas and information today. And we use those in the book as well. And then we will be sharing some specific examples and strategies to help you in your work with engaging families. And we built a significant amount of time at the end of the webinar to answer your particular questions. So we do invite you to be listening throughout our presentation for areas where you think we could answer questions or give you more examples or point you in the direction of resources in any way. And so that's our overview. And I wanted to also mention that when we took a look at the list of people who signed up for today's webinar, my goodness, what a variety of positions. It's a wonderful thing to think how many different people that work in early childhood in different capacities are all coming together to think about better ways to work with families, to partner with families, to keep those families engaged with our programs and with their child's early education. We see a lot of teachers and assistant teachers were registered, but we also have directors, family child care providers, family workers, people who do professional development, coaching, master teachers. We have people who work directly with families, people who work with infants and toddlers, people who work with preschoolers and older. So we really do hope to address all of your interests today, but we invite you to make sure you let us know what your questions are so we can make sure everybody gets what they need out of today's webinar. We always like to start with this kind of discussion of what in the world do we mean by family engagement? Why is that term so important right now? And a lot of us can remember when we used to talk more about parent involvement, and the traditional way for programs to describe parent involvement is by showing a list of events that they held and things that they give to parents, like a newsletter or a handout or a family workshop or whatever. And as more research has happened, more stories coming in from the field about what's really successful, we found more and more that engagement has a different feel. And family engagement is not just about what you send to parents. It's much more about the relationship that each teacher builds with each and every family and how the whole system of the program supports that. Because as much as we want to support the work of those teachers and family child care providers, we know you don't do it alone. And we all need to sort of share in this understanding of what's needed to make sure that every family feels involved, every family feels like important partners contributing to this relationship. So we see that when we talk about family engagement, we emphasize that the families and the educators interact regularly, not just one way, but two ways. They interact with each other. They build a relationship that carries them through in the fun times and in the difficult times. They share goals for the child's development. They work together towards those goals. They exchange strategies, right? Everybody involved in that child's life has some important knowledge that can help the other people involved in that child's life, and they can all partner together by exchanging strategies. You know, here's what works at home. Here's a video of what my child singing this lengthy song at home, even though he doesn't seem to want to sing at school. And we see that we want to have that focus on the child's well-being. That's a shared focus, whether the program personnel or the families may not always see eye to eye, but there's one thing they clearly agree on, is that their shared focus is on what's best for that child now and in preparing those families, because they only stay with us for a short while, but we're preparing them to be their child's greatest support and advocate forever. So family engagement really focuses on putting all those things together. And so we started to think of new terms to use to explain family engagement. And to get that discussion started, we have a question in a poll for you. So we're now going to post a poll that you can answer and see how we all react and if we all agree. So you should now be seeing the poll, and you can select what words would you use to describe what is really effective family engagement. Which of these terms do you think would work? And if you have something else that you want to contribute, you could always type it in the question box, and we'll see it, and we can keep an eye on what additional words we think we are hearing from you. And then we'll talk a little bit about what these words mean to our work. Okay, and now I think we can show the results to the audience. And my goodness, that's a lot of votes for one answer, relationship-based. And so that's an important understanding that a relationship is a two-way thing, isn't it? It is about caring about each other, respecting each other, listening to each other. And if we can build that understanding of that relationship-based approach to family engagement, we'll be hearing more and more of those success stories, and we'll start to see those challenges that are faced out there in programs. We'll begin to have answers as families change, as programs and as teachers and family child care providers begin to adapt and update some of the ways that they have engaged with those families. So this is our list of words that we came across quite often in our work in researching for the book. Family engagement is spontaneous, strengths-based, collaborative, systematic, not a job for one teacher to do on their own, individualized, so it meets the needs of each family, because what works for one family may not work for another. But our goal is the well-being for all children, so we want to make sure that the strategies we choose, that there's always something for every family. Some families will participate in one way, other families will participate in another way, but when we list all our families, we should be able to show that there's something that works for every family in building that relationship. And so to support that pursuit of those high-quality, reciprocal, strengths-based, relationship-based, individualized relationships, we just use the 6 family engagement principles that were developed by NAEYC that really help us to organize what are the things we want you to know, what are the things that are working out there in the field. And to make this, to get this started, I'm handing it off now to Derry Koralek, who's going to talk to you about a few of these principles and how they work. And Derry, I'm not hearing you, and I know that you are preparing to talk about principle number 1, and here you go.
I'm here. I'm very excited to be here with you. I'm really happy that there's so many people who are interested in this really, really important topic. It's something that is incorporated in various standards. We don't always have the kinds of resources and support needed to implement a robust family engagement program. So we're hoping that our book and this webinar will contribute to that. So as Karen described, there are 6 principles that are recommended by NAEYC and us, that if you take these all together, you're likely to develop a wonderful family engagement approach and practices that will guide everything that you do with families. Now, this first principle, programs invite families to participate in decision-making and goal setting for their child. To me, it kind of goes without saying that, of course, you would want to do this. But like everything, it's important to take time to really think about it and think about what you're doing to implement it. It relies on partnerships between educators and families. And these partnerships focus on the child and providing the best possible care and education for the child. Some families aren't used to this. They may need a little bit of encouragement to participate. Possibly their cultural practices or the countries from which they came, or maybe just within their own families. They're just not used to seeing themselves and educators as partners. Maybe they see educators as more authority figures. Whatever, they need a little more encouragement, perhaps. So this principle can be implemented in a variety of ways. Some are more formal, and as in conferences and home visits and other scheduled experiences. And others are kind of in the moment, the ways that you exchange information with families at a drop-off or a pickup time or through text or email. In this photo, it looks like that's what's happening. It looks like a parent and a teacher or a couple of teachers are having a moment where they exchange information, and maybe they're doing a little planning for what's to happen with the child the next day or the next week. Now, what's really important for this to be successful is that the educator and the family have to believe that they each have something useful to share. Both members of the partnership need to exchange and then apply this information while making joint decisions. So one example I thought of is what might happen if a toddler's family and the teachers of that toddler each use different approaches to toilet training and learning. Maybe in one setting, the child gets an M&M every time they use the toilet successfully, and in another setting, it's more matter of fact. This could be very confusing for a child, and they wouldn't know what kind of behavior was really expected by these adults. A much easier, natural, and successful process would be for the child would be when the home and the program use similar strategies. So that's just one example of where the decision-making and goal setting is done together. When programs adopt and implement these kinds of practices, everyone knows that they're important and they're valued. For example, if your conference planning forms have places built right in where there's information provided by families and information provided by educators that's recorded and documented in one place, that conveys the importance of these two groups working together. Possibly there's a signature page at the end that kind of summarizes the discussion and the goals set, and both the family and the teachers sign that together, and they both would get a copy so they would know what was going on. This principle might be built into staff training and evaluations. Maybe coaching supports this principle. It could be included in family handbooks, and always communications between the family and the educators invite the exchange of ideas. One time when this is particularly critical is when a baby enters care for the first time. Now, we all know that parents are the experts on their baby. They've likely spent several months getting to know the baby. They know what his or her preferences are, and they know what makes this baby really unique. What are the unique characteristics? And they have a healthy attachment with this baby. And because of that, they may be a little bit wary about leaving their very young infant with someone who is in essence a stranger. So in these situations, it's very important for the educator and the family to learn to become comfortable with each other. Perhaps making multiple visits to see the program in action can be helpful, meeting with staff, sharing concerns, and having lots of opportunities to exchange information are a good way to begin this reciprocal relationship that's going to help you implement this principle. This is just a start, however. This has to continue. The families and the caregivers will need many more opportunities to check in with each other, share stories, especially important at this for this age group. Families have a great need for lots of information about what their babies are doing during the day. Maybe they have ideas for carrying out routines or calming their child because they know how to do this in ways that work specifically for that baby. And this kind of a trusting relationship between the home and the program benefits everybody. The staff feel more confident, the families feel a sense of relief, and babies thrive. So another important part of implementing this principle is not just exchanging information, but working with the family to set goals and plan ways that will help the child achieve the goal. So maybe at the start of the year, a goal might be to help the child adjust to being part of this new classroom. A teacher might ask the parent to provide some photos. This is very common practice. To make it really meaningful, make sure that you have photos of anyone who nurtures this child, whether they live in this country or they live somewhere else, whether they're a blood relative or a family friend who lives with the family. Anyone who's part of that household that's important to that child. And then you post them and make sure the child can engage in conversations that will lead the child to feel more comfortable. As kids get older, their skills and interests change, and you want to know about what they're doing at home, and you want to tell families about what the child is doing within the program setting. You might say, Ronaldo finger painted today for the first time. Up until now, he's just watched, but today was the day he actually got his fingers into the paint. Maybe this would lead to a further discussion about other ways to introduce activities that involve small motor skills, or maybe he's been reluctant due to some kind of sensory issue, or maybe he's just getting mixed messages about getting dirty versus creative exploration. At any rate, this information sharing and then moving on to plan together is what's required here. The most of these suggestions so far are things you do on a daily basis. But there are also conferences, which is a more organized way to exchange information and plan jointly for the future. This is a time when you would be sharing information using examples of the child's progress, whether it was artwork or scribbles and writing or photographs. Lots of times you can just share photographs that, say, show the child climbing up to the top of the slide for the first time, and that expression on his or her face just really showing what progress the child had made. Then together, using this information, you're able to set developmental goals and plan for ways to reach them. The second principle has to do with communication. It says that teachers and programs engage families in two-way communication. There's huge overlap here between what was in the first principle and what's in this one. Communication is a necessary part of the decision-making and goal setting for the child. It can't be done without effective two-way communication. Communication in general should be timely. For example, good idea to let families know well in advance of a family fun run so they can practice for it. They have plenty of time to prepare. Doesn't help to just let them know the day before. Communication should be continuous so families know that they're not just going to get one or two updates about their children's participation in the program, but it'll be in an ongoing way. They'll always have new information about what's going on. It's also important to use multiple approaches to send and receive communication, and it's important to tailor them to what kinds of information are shared and what families prefer, how they prefer to get information, how they prefer to send it back. Now we're going to go into our second poll, to ask you to tell us a little about what strategies you've used to build two-way communication with families. So you go ahead and take a few minutes to go through there and tell us whether you use these items or other ones. We want to hear about what your practices are. Okay. Oh my goodness. Well, that's very interesting. It shows that many people use in-person meetings, followed by email, and then to a lesser degree, private conversations, text message programs, and other. We'll be interested to hear about what those others might be. Okay, so results have been sent to the audience. So let me go back to this second principle. We've already said it's a critical part of relationship building, that it starts for the first time when you meet a family, and it continues throughout their participation in the program. Communication isn't effective. It's not really communication if it isn't both sent and received. So if you send home reams of paper and the families never read them, that's not really communication. They're more likely to actually receive the information, that is, read it or look at it, absorb it in some way, when it's brief, to the point, and delivered in the most accessible way. More and more often, this is digital, not print. Now, some communication practices are individualized to the classroom teacher or to the family child care provider. For example, some teachers like to post photos on a protected website and invite families to ask questions and make comments. Other kinds of strategies are program-wide. For example, a program might coordinate and update enrollment forms and surveys to make sure they're only asking for information once and only information that is actually needed. And that would be affecting everyone in the program. We recommend the program families. This will ensure there's a purpose for every communication, that communications are not repetitive. People hate that. And that families know when information requires a response. For example, maybe a medical form needs to be completed and sent back to the program. Sometimes information is just information. You're just sharing news or updates. And sometimes it's to invite an action. And here it would be something that, for example, you might want to do at home with your child. The plan should also address frequency and the quantity of information shared with families. Now, another thing you want to be really careful about in communication is not overdoing it. When families get too much information, too many communications, just like for any of us, it's overwhelming. And when programs over-communicate, families don't read it. They don't look at it, and they might miss something really, really vital because of that. One extremely popular way to communicate with families is through a text messaging program. These days, almost everyone has a cell phone, and they use text to communicate. There are standard text messaging programs that early childhood programs use. The Mind, Talking Points, and Dojo are 3 examples, but you may know or use other ones. Once again, moderation is the key here. You don't want to flood families' mailboxes with messages, because they're not going to read them. If you overdo it, you've lost them. So, now one program we know of, and this program is highlighted in the book, decided that it needed a plan to communicate with families before they even began enrolling children. And they considered what family preferences were based on who the parents were, what the parents' age group was, what their preferences were, and they decided that because so many families like to use digital media, that would be a part of their plan. And because some other parents really liked written and verbal exchanges too, they would incorporate all of that in their one plan. So they started with having an inviting and supportive environment so everybody felt welcome. And then they determined that their communications would be through print, person-to-person interactions, individualized text, and through an app. And they could use that app to share photos, videos, and so on, and instantly exchange information. Each day, children and teachers would be able to summarize on a think time board, and this would be displayed outside the classroom, but then a photo would be taken, and that would be uploaded for families who were not able to be there at pickup time would also be able to see it. Now, Principle 3 is programs and teachers engage families in ways that are truly reciprocal. Reciprocal means there's give and take, it's shared and equal, and it relies on expertise. Expertise provided by the teacher, who probably knows a lot about children in general, and by the parents, who are experts on their child. One program did this, and again, this one is in our book. They planned a breakfast club where families, it was a family childcare provider, and when families dropped off their children this morning, to avoid all that stress that sometimes comes from those drop-off times, they had a family breakfast, and families could stay for breakfast and have a much more relaxed transition. Now, ensuring reciprocity does not always go smoothly. Sometimes it takes a lot of patience and a lot of tact, and it may take a lot of time before the give and take is truly reciprocal. Now, you may have noticed that there's a lot of connections and overlap in these three principles, but they all contribute to the overall goal of reciprocal relationships with families that support young children. Kelly will now share the final three principles of family engagement. Kelly?
Thank you, Derry. So we are really excited that we're able to offer not only the practical principles of NAEYC that in our book as Derry spoke, but also just practical information as we're going in. So we are going to keep moving on and keep moving forward. And so Principle 4 is programs to provide learning activities for the home and in the community. And we believe that this is important as we move forward. So as we're considering this, one of the things we want you to be sure to look at is that in your own communities that you're individualizing for the families that you serve and for the community that you live in. In our book, we talk about basic things like home visits and how the home visits are a way to be able to connect family and school together. And so as we're thinking about families, we actually tell a story of how you set up for successful home visits in your program. But more than that, you make it a point for parents to enter into a relationship with you as a teacher, as an administrator, whoever is doing the home visit, and give them an ability to be able to transfer the learning that's happening at school to the home environment. In our programs, we offer an opportunity for families to actually take home packs into their home that are duplicates of what happened in the classroom. So on a family math night, families are able to take the activities they do on the family math night home that night, and then they're able to use the same material. What's exciting is because the children see the materials that are in their classroom that are also now in their home, and they're more engaged in that learning, and the parents are able to see their children as capable. And so by providing learning activities, the parents are seen as a success, and as the child's first teachers, we know that they are, but they're also seen as capable of helping their child to learn the different things as well. In community, we extend that same work. We have one program that we highlighted in our book that did a community-wide harvest festival and carnival. And the carnival was actually planned by parents over a 6-month period, and they had the opportunity to craft the ideas, to craft the activities, to be engaged with children from all ages, because the families range from infant to 8 years old. And so they were able to create activities that would engage the entire family. Because it was a parent-led project, the teachers were able to come in and support the families, and the families were able to engage with their teachers in new ways. So where relationships were hard with some families, they developed a new resource because they built a relationship in this time of this 6 months. A question that was asked in our you engage a family age. And so it takes time. It takes an effort on all different ways to do that. And so the community activities is a great way to do that. Another great community activity would be events such as health fairs, community awareness events around child abuse prevention, mental health. And so those are things that you can tap into as you're working with your families and thinking beyond your program doors. And so when you're going into the community, you're tapping into the services that families are receiving in the community, as well as your partners in the community who may not be aware of what you have to offer. To principle number 5, and that is programs invite families to participate in program-level decisions and wider advocacy efforts. So from the very beginning of our program, we are engaging with families not for just the moment that they'll be with us in our program, but for a lifetime of learning. And so we want to really rally around the readiness goals for children to be ready for school beyond our programs, our early childhood programs, but then for the families to become advocates for their own children's learning as well as other children in their community or in their family. So the story I love to tell about this work is a story of one of the families we highlighted, the Williams family. And because our idea is to engage families from the minute they enroll until they leave our doors when they go on to school programs, we are always thinking first. Our polls show that. Our polls show the importance of having relationships, education, and opportunities. And so as we were in the beginning, the family was a little, removed. They didn't really want to get involved. They didn't want the resources we were offering. But over the years, and the years meaning 5 years this family was in our building, over a 5-year span, they began really listening to what we had to offer. And so this family had 2 children in the family who were diagnosed with special needs. And so as they were going through their processes, we were a resource for them to connect them to resources in the community. And so at the initial, the family was not ready to engage, was not ready to identify what supports were needed, but the teacher kept asking, not every day because that can get annoying, but they would periodically mention, we have these resources available, would you like me to do a referral? And the family would say no many times. And then one day they observed their child and they said, this is what you were talking about. And so the teacher immediately, she offered the resource again, and the family said, yes, we're ready, we want to do it. This same family was able to get the supports that they needed, but then they became advocates themselves, and they created a parent support group for parents who were just like them when they started out and for families who are navigating all of these different systems. That same support group is available to families in our program now who continue to be served by the program, and the family who initiated, they're gone. to elementary school, and their children are still thriving, but it was because of those beginning efforts and program-level decision-making that included families in that decision. So be aware that all of your program-level decisions need to be starting from engagement to advocacy is the lens we look at. And also it needs to be inclusive of what the program policies are, but also inclusive of the families that you serve. So the last principle that we want to share with you today is principle number 6, and that programs implement a comprehensive program-level systems. We know that everything works by a system, either a system that is efficient or a system that may reveal areas that we need to focus on. And so as we are moving forward and really engaging families, because that's language, so no longer are we looking at our programs to just look at the program, get the service, leave our building, but we want to engage families throughout their time that they are with us, and we want to engage them in such a way that it infiltrates our entire system. And so a comprehensive system would involve those who are in the health department that help with health-related things, education, family engagement, all of those areas, disabilities and mental health. And so we want to engage every part of the program. If you're a standalone program, what engagement may look like is that maybe the services that are needed by your family are not in your building. And so those community outreaches that you've done may bring in services to your families, but we look at it comprehensively. From a child entering the program to leaving the program, what are all of the needs and services that they might need? So in one program that we highlighted, we looked at family members who can volunteer in the classroom as classroom representatives to get a view of what happens in the classroom, as well as be a part of a parent and family policy council. So they're able to inform policies of the school, as well as engage in their children's learning and development. And then also getting them involved maybe in an education committee that focuses on creating home packs for the home. And so being comprehensive in our approach will give us a wider lens to serve families through, but it also helps us to reach our outcomes because families are engaged in that process as we go through it. And one of the big key pieces for a comprehensive program is that you're looking at the data that your program is developing, and you're looking at ways of improving those areas and how you can extend your reach as a program. And so not only just the families in your building, but families in the community as well. So we're going to wrap up the principles, and we're going to hand it back to Derry, and she's going to share with you the next phase of the webinar. Thank you.
I'm here. I'm just trying to make it work. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is a cover of our new book, about which you can tell we're very, very excited. Families and educators together, building great relationships that support young children. We have many more ideas in this book, and they are ideas that you can adapt to meet the needs of your program to make it appropriate for the families and children with whom you work. The book covers these 6 principles that are related and interwoven. We have 6 chapters, and included are the experiences from real teachers and real programs. Okay. I'm sorry. One of the features we think is pretty unique is we've included 18 different stories contributed by people who work in programs, teachers, administrators, directors. They're in all kinds of positions. And what they've done is include in the book stories about challenges that they face and how they address them. what was the strategy they used, the results, and then an update. And we think these are really useful because they really happened. They're not something that we made up. They're something that really happened in this very diverse programs. All different kinds of programs have contributed these. Every chapter ends with reflection questions. These are questions that you can use to expand upon the content that was in that chapter. You can use them alone. You can use them with a colleague, or perhaps if there's a coach or a director or a college professor, a professional development specialist, etc., who leads groups of learners, they can use them as discussion questions. This is an example of a graphic that appears in the communication chapter, and it's a way to summarize and expand on the content. Here's a similar one. This one was about a family and communication planning checklist. We have a long process described of how you would go about developing a family communication plan, and this is a checklist for those of you who would like to actually do that, which we hope you will. And then here's a sample from the appendix. The appendix includes resources for educators and family support professionals, but also resources that are directed to families themselves. And we've included the title, author, source, and so on for each item, the description, and a sample of what kinds of content you might find in it. And now it's time for questions and answers. So I send this back to Holly for you.
Okay, thank you all for that wonderful information. We have some great audience questions lined up here. The first one is, what does it mean when you say family engagement is spontaneous?
I think I said that, so I think I will take that. I think of it as it just happens in the moment. It's not something like, your planned approach for a home visit or a conference. It's just the way you have a natural interaction with a family when they drop off their child. I saw a father sharing a little video he had made that was on his phone, and it was of his son, and he and the teacher were looking at it together, and I thought, boy, that's a perfect example of family engagement in the moment. It was spontaneous. It wasn't something anybody planned. I hope that explains that.
Thank you. And Derry, I think this may also have been something that you talked about. A couple of audience members asked, what were the 3 text messaging programs that you mentioned?
Okay. They are mentioned in the book, but let me mention them again, and I'll say it a little more slowly. They are called Remind, Talking Points, and Dojo. And Karen, do you have any you'd want to add?
There are other message programs that come with program management software as well, like Brightwheel and Tadpoles and things like that. But the ones that are purely set up as messaging systems are Remind.com and TalkingPoints.org, and a lot of other programs use Class Dojo of their elementary schools and at their preschool programs.
Okay. Those are the ones we included in the book.
Okay, thank you. Do any of you have a tool that you recommend that can be used to set goals with families?
Kelly, is there something your program uses?
We have a tool that we have created. It's not on the market, but what we use is a family matrix. And so at the beginning of enrollment, we have a series of questions that we go through with the family, and the family actually sets goals for themselves personally, such as getting a new home. They set a goal for their child around school readiness, that they, whatever the goal is, and they work with the teacher on that one. And then they set another goal that's kind of a dream goal that the family advocate in our programs that we use can work with them towards. And so the matrix gives us kind of some background information on what they're dealing with in the family and what their immediate goals are, but it's a form that we've created. If you are interested, I can send that out. It's, there's no copyright on it, and I'll be happy to share it.
Thank you, Kelly. Related to that, one of our listeners has mentioned that some families choose not to be engaged in this process of working with teachers to set goals for their children, and some actually seem bothered when teachers request the information. And how can these families be engaged in a way that doesn't leave them feeling annoyed?
Well, I'll jump in on that. Oh, Kelly.
Go ahead,
Kelly. Oh, I'll start by saying one. I'm going to start by saying one thing and then hand it over to you, Kelly. And that is, this is going back to what I said in the beginning about finding different ways to engage with each family. And so, you might have an idea of what is the best way to engage with families, like goal setting, but that may not work for every family. And, one approach is to try to change the family's mind, but another approach would be to change what your program does, to rethink, well, maybe there are a range of ways that we can get input from these families, but this family may not be the family that we do goal setting with. So that, offers a range of other ways. And Kelly, you might have some examples of how you've handled that in your program.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So I would echo everything Karen said. And the other thing is to keep the mindset that I'm partnering with the family. And so I'm not putting my goals on the family, but it's coming from them. And the way that you do that is just, again, by relationship building. But at the moment, if there's a deliverable you can offer that meets a need of the family, that's a door opener for the next time. And so I tell my teachers often to think of what's something small that can be a deliverable for that family, such as they're looking for other families who have resources for working with their children who have autism. And so giving them the flyer, connecting them with another parent, and only doing that. And then when the next opportunity comes up for you to share information, they'll be more likely to listen to what you have because you've built relationship to meet a felt need. And make it a long-term goal, not, one and done, but you're establishing relationship over a period of time, which is the story that I highlighted. That family was not engaged at the beginning, and they didn't want to be bothered, but after 5 years of us developing a relationship, they were open and receptive, and now they're an advocate for other families as well.
I would just like to add there also tact and patience, I think, are really important, and keeping it small, and maybe not calling it goals. Maybe goals sounds like too big a word. It's what would you like your child to be doing? Sounds like something maybe parents were willing to participate in.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, how do you feel about teachers and parents texting each other about school matters? Are there some guidelines you would recommend?
Well, I'm going to jump in there because I have a daughter who's a teacher who gets texts all the time. And I think that this is perhaps an area where the teacher has to set some kind of boundaries that Otherwise, it's never ending for them. If you're asking about what sort of content they should be texting about, once again, I'd throw that back to the program. That I think it's very individualized. And that could be something that families and teachers work on together in terms of what are guidelines for texting, so that everyone's on the same wavelength.
Yeah, and that's what those text messaging programs are for. They don't actually give you access to each other's phone numbers or personal information. It's a pipeline where information can go both ways, but you can turn it off when you want private time, so your phone is not digging all the time. It's not going to your personal text message. They don't but the other value of those text messaging programs is the teacher can send one message and every family can set the language in which they receive the information. A family can send it in their home language and the teacher receives it in English or whatever language. So that's another way to put those boundaries on there, is by using a program that's designed for that rather than your personal text messages.
Okay, thank you. Another one, how can we help families who have difficulty finding the time to have a meeting with teachers, but they want to help and they ask material to work on at home?
Well, we do offer suggestions about that in the book, because that comes up quite a lot, now more than ever. And, it goes back to that idea of making sure you find a way for every family to participate. And that means being open to all kinds of different schedules. And programs have found ways to encourage families to participate at home. One way is sending really clear ideas for extending learning at home. And another way is by really taking a look throughout your program. What are the things you need help with? So a family could bring home toys and fix them at home and bring them back, or bring home the dress-up clothes and clean them and mend them and bring them back, or send things in that can be used in the classroom even though they can't be there. And some families can participate by video chatting, reading a book or singing a song with the children, by taking a quick break at work and going through video chats or Skype or FaceTime or whatever.
Thank you, Karen. What are some things you would include in a home pack?
So this is Kelly. I'll start, and then Derry, if you want to add. And so in our home pack, the idea is to give families things that they could use easily at home. And so we will include a learning activity, and usually if it's materials that are needed, we'll put them in the bag. So if it's the prompt is go get a blanket and lay down on your back and look at the sky tonight with your child. What images do you see? And then in the bag, we may have some cotton to emulate clouds. We may have some crayons or watercolors, and they can duplicate what they see. So the idea is not just to give them materials like puzzles and whatnot to do, but is to give them materials that they're going to interact with their child. And then we ask them to record, bring the picture that they made, and then also record their story. If it was they took a snapshot of it, or if they wanted to write it in a journal, depending on the literacy level of the families. And so that's the transfer back to school. The teacher uses that in their lesson plan as well. And those are given out once a month, and they're pre-made. We usually use practicum students to help us create those. And so parents are getting at least 12 this school year because we're year-round school.
Okay, we have time.
I was just going to add here that I think it's a great idea to model use of items that are found around the home within these kits, and to possibly have another group of things that are like a lending library, and they're related to the content that is being addressed. in the classroom during a specific time period. We have examples of book bags where programs have developed book bags to be used over the summertime, possibly when a program is not in session. There's quite a bit of content in the book about this model of helping families provide and build on learning at home.
Okay, well, that ends our webinar. We've come to the end. Thank you, Derry, Karen, and Kelly, and to all of you who joined us today. We really hope you have gotten some things out of this presentation that you can use. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Goodbye.
Pleasure to be here.